halfway through, we'll make this restroom break. There is a restroom on the bus, however, so you can use it if you need it. And we'll make a few photo stops also. Let's start with architecture. On your left, this is a white granite from southern Quebec. It was built in the 1930s as the Sun Life Insurance Company building. Here on the right, in the middle of that square, is the only horse monument in Montreal. It is honoring the soldiers from Canada who fought in the South African War. And here on the right, another British symbol, a lion. This was put there in 1897 because that's when the 60th anniversary of the crowning of Queen Victoria was celebrated. In front of us, we will see a religious building that is our French Catholic cathedral. What's a cathedral? It is where the bishop is, or in this case, since this is an archdiocese, this is where the archbishop is. And right away, we'll see that that's not a coincidence if that building was built on your left, because you have a religious facing a financial building. On the right, by the way, don't miss the cheese grater here on the right. That tower there, La Rallador de Queso on the right, you'll see the cheese grater. It's a nickname, it's a term of endearment, the Marriott Hotel. So back to the Catholic Cathedral, Marie Reine du Monde is the name, which means Mary Queen of the World. As you can see, it's also a basilica. It's the cathedral, but it's also one of our basilicas. In front of us, on the right, is the Fairmont Hotel. That is where the famous song Give Peace a Chance was recorded in 1969 by John Lennon and Yoko Ono. Now that hotel is in strike and it's in lockout, that's why all the stickers are there. On your left, do not miss the giant ring. Through the ring, you can see the mountain. You can see the cross on the mountain. When you see the cross on the mountain, you are seeing it from the right spot. And now we'll see another iconic skyscraper. On your left, you will see this pink skyscraper very soon here on your left. It's going to look to you like the Batman building, but that's not what it is. It is a giant bishop's hat. Here on your left, the giant pink bishop's hat. Sombrero del Obispo. Now this street is called René Lévesque. It's the big boulevard in downtown Montreal, and René Lévesque was the premier of Quebec from the mid-70s to the mid-80s. He was the first head of state to be in favor of Quebec separating from the rest of Canada. He did not achieve that goal, as you know. He made a referendum in 1980, and 40% of the people voted yes for separation. Then he died, and then there was a second referendum in 1995, 30 years ago. And that second time around, it was very, very close, as 49.5% of the people said yes, we want Quebec to separate from the rest of Canada. It was not the majority, but it was almost half the population. This was 30 years ago. Will there be a third one? It is not impossible at all. But now we're busy with Canadian elections. We'll talk more about that later. We'll see electoral signs. We're going to make a right. You'll see this Olympic flame in front of us. The Olympic flame reminds us of the Summer Olympics of 1976. So in front of us, the Olympic flame. That is not where the Olympics took place. This was made to promote the Canadian teams. And here on the left, between the buildings, we'll see the second basilica of the tour. It is the Irish Church of Montreal. You will never guess what the name is. St. Patrick's, absolutely on the left. If you look carefully, you'll even see shamrocks. And here on the left, this is a a brand new building. It is a century-old institution. Here on the left, it is this very prestigious business school. We're now about to enter the international district. Quartier International. International district because we here have more than 70 head offices of international organizations. The most prestigious of them all being ICAO, International Civil Aviation Organization. Organisation de l'Aviation Civile Internationale. Now the reason why I say that it's prestigious is that it is a United Nations organization and it's the one dealing with civil aviation. I will show you that building very soon. It is that building on your right with the horizontal windows. Here on the right, that is the building where United Nations makes big decisions about civil aviation. It means that it's in that building that big decisions were made right after the 9/11 attacks 24 years ago. Here on your right is this black skyscraper that was built in the 60s by the company called Società Generale Immobiliare di Lavori di Utilità Pubblica ed Agricola. What language is that? Italiano. Because the Vatican built it, because it belonged to the Vatican, that real estate company. It doesn't exist anymore. If you've seen The Godfather Part 3, which I'm sure some of you have, well, it's part of the plot of that movie, what happened with that real estate branch of the Vatican. But because the Vatican built it, they hired Pierluigi Nervi, this Italian engineer who also is famous for having designed the Watergate residential complex in BC. And now we'll see another one of the famous places where symbols face each other. On the right, Queen Victoria, quintessential British symbol. What do we have facing Queen Victoria? Look at that, it's a true Parisian metro entrance, straight from the early 1900s, although it was put there only in the 1960s for a World's Fair of 67. And that's one of many instances where you do have symbols facing each other, a French and a British one. Here on the right, parallel to us, is the bike lane. There's not a lot of cyclists, yet please be very careful because cyclists usually don't make any noise. That makes them quite treacherous. And even though this is technically a highway, it doesn't mean that that will be respected by cyclists. They're not the most disciplined people. I know, I am a cyclist myself. On the left, you see this very colorful facade. This is Palais des Congrès, the convention center. And if you look at those 5 flags, look at that. You got Quebec, Canada, Quebec, Montreal, Quebec. So 3 out of 5 flags are Quebec flags, meaning that Quebec paid the most money for the convention center. The whole convention center on your left, parallel to us, is built on top of an underground highway. Everything. They integrated the old facades when they extended it 25 years ago. For example, here on the left coming up where that little blue crane is, this used to be the fire headquarters of Montreal. And then we'll see another one that is this beautiful, very elegant Art Deco facade. So all of that is still the convention center, one of the biggest ones in North America. It is connected with the famous underground city of Montreal. I'll tell you more about that. We'll finish the tour where we started the tour, and that's right next to one of the many entrances to the underground city. Now, why do we have an underground highway below the convention center? Because the mayor of Montreal in the 1960s wanted to demolish all of old Montreal. He did not because these 2 Dutch architects, the Van Ginkel, stopped the mayor from doing that. Otherwise, there would be no old Montreal. How do you know if you are in old Montreal? You look at the street signs. You see in front of us on the right, the next across the street has this red street sign. That means old Montreal. So every time you see a red street sign, you know that you are in old Montreal. On your right is old Montreal. On your left, to the left side of the street, is still the international district. You can recognize the International District by the diagonal lampposts. And again, look at the vertical lines of this beautifully renovated Art Deco building. As a matter of fact, it's just the facade, but look at that, they just cleaned it all up. It's straight from the 1930s. That's the decade for Art Deco. We're now welcoming 2 more guests, and right after we'll do the photo stop. So this will be the first photo stop. Buses are not allowed in the old town, and so that's why we stop here, so that you can go to the square in front of the church. The church is Notre Dame. That's the church that people call the cathedral, but it's never been the cathedral. Doesn't matter if you still call it the cathedral, that's what most Montrealers say anyway, but it's not. Anyway, but what it is, it's the church where Céline Dion got married. That's what it is. So it's a beautiful church that's definitely worth visiting. It's the most famous and the most beautiful one, which is why people think that it's the cathedral. And because it's beautiful, they charge you $16. It's worth visiting it, but we don't really have the time for that because we have more to show you. So you can go on your own. You can take the first right. You'll climb this little hill, and right away you'll be at the square, Place d'Armes, in front of Église Notre-Dame. You have 15 minutes. We're staying here. You don't need to go. You can also stay here if you prefer. You can leave your things here. We're staying here. Always be very careful when you cross the bike lane. Always look left and right. Tour on a Sunday morning. Not a lot of traffic. So the next stop will be the restroom break. What I haven't said though is that the restroom break is at this market, Le Marché Maisonneuve, where you'll have the opportunity to get a little coffee and a little croissant. More to come on that. On the left, you can see this white tent. That is a temporary fire truck garage here on the left. Coming up on your right, just here are the offices of La Presse, one of our 4 daily newspapers. And here on the left, you will see one of the gates of Chinatown, here on the left. Chinatown on the left, and on the right, Palais de Justice, courthouse. Look at the size of that building. That's how much justice we got. On the right, you can see this gray stone building. That is the back of the old courthouse. On the left, you see this little construction site. That is the future Place des Montréalaises. This will be a park honoring Montreal women. Speaking of which, on the right is the back of City Hall, where we have the first woman as the mayor of Montreal. And Montreal city proper is not small, it's 1.8 million people. She beat the same guy twice, by the way, but she decided not to run again. Coming up on your left, because this is a big hospital, you will see the church tower that was integrated into the hospital here on the left. On your left is still the underground highway. That's why we don't have any skyscrapers. And now we'll take this street on the right, one of the very few streets in Old Montreal where buses are allowed to go. Because we want to go to the river to show you the old port and talk about the golden age of Montreal. So if you look at the street signs here on the right of the corner, you see that they are white, and the next ones very soon will be red, as will be officially entering Old Montreal. Motorcycle gang on the left. We're now crossing this street called Saint Louis. So Louis is like yours truly. And Saint, well, according to my wife, it's also yours truly. That's what she tells me every morning when we have our coffee, that I'm a saint. It has to be true, since my wife is always right. On the left, you can see these old train tracks. It reminds us that it's from right here that in 1886, the first transcontinental train left, 1886, 140 years ago. And it arrived in Vancouver 5 days later. What's interesting is that that is not possible to do anymore, meaning yes, you could go to Vancouver by train, but you would need to switch trains a few times. We're making a right, and in front of us on the left, you can see this clock tower that is a memorial for World War I and World War II soldiers. Here on the right, where these people are sitting in the park, you can see this structure This looks like rusty steel here on the right. This reminds us of the wall of Montreal. That's how big it was. It's exactly here that the wall was. On the left you can see an old hangar. And coming up on the right you can see the old market, built out of gray limestone of Montreal. So here on the left, the old hangar, reminding us of the golden age of the Port of Montreal. And here on the right, look at the sheer size of this building. It is perfectly symmetrical. It is gigantic, built in the 1840s. And it is gigantic, especially when you think about the fact that only 50,000 people lived in Montreal. Here on the right is the middle of it, and it keeps going. That's the second wing. It's classical revival architecture, so you see a lot of details reminding you of Roman architecture, like the pilasters, like the arches. On the right, all the buildings are built with the gray limestone of Montreal. Oh, this is a surfer. So he went surfing already at 9:45. On the right is a Place Jacques-Cartier. We got people from London. Well, at Trafalgar Square in London, you have an Admiral Nelson column. We also have one. It's that little column at the end. Yes, ours is smaller, yet ours is older. It's more than 30 years older than the one at Trafalgar Square. This one is from the 1800s. And that elegant building to the right of the column, this is the City Hall. We saw the back of it. That's the main facade, Hôtel de Ville. So we are now driving on the southern limit of Old Montreal. On your right is Old Montreal, and on your left is the Old Port. On your right, all of these buildings were built in the 1800s as merchants' houses. They were built at the time when here on the left was a huge port, a big port, one of the biggest ones in the world for grain, for cereal, essentially wheat. So on your left is the old port, and that is where the port used to be. Now crossing Boulevard Saint-Laurent, a very important street in Montreal. If you were to take that street on the right, here on the left, you can see this white tower followed by the glass tower. The white tower is an old tower from the time of the port, and the glass tower is a brand new glass lookout tower for the cruise ship terminal. So this on the left was a big port until the 1960s. In front of us on the right here is this symmetrical building. This is the old customs house from the 1830s here on the right. And right in front of us is the archaeology museum, le Musée d'Archéologie. It is built right here because this is the exact location of the foundation of the city. It is exactly here that in 1642, Ville Marie, so the city of Mary, was founded, which later became Montreal, later became Montreal, and then went back to Montreal. Again on the right, these are merchants' houses, all built with the gray limestone of Montreal, reminding us of the golden age of the Port of Montreal. On your left, this literally was the world's biggest inland port for grain, for wheat, in the 1920s. Now on your left, through the trees, you should be able to see this unusual building, which is made out of 350 concrete blocks. We'll get closer, don't worry. In front of us, this man with his arms crossed is welcoming us. instrumental in the development of the port here on the left. Speaking of the port on your right, these are old warehouses from the 1800s. Followed by, here on the right, the customs house. Look at the size of that building on the right. It was built 100 years ago, reminding us of the port of Montreal, of how important it was 100 years ago. Still red street signs, so that means that we are still in Old Montreal, but we are just about to exit Old Montreal. We'll be making a left because Angelo wants to show you these two little islands that were used for the World's Fair of '67, a very successful World's Fair. Speaking of islands, we are on a big island ourselves. Montreal is one of the 15 cities that are on the big island of Montreal, Île de Montréal. So that island is 480 square kilometers. That means 9 times the size of Manhattan. And our island is shaped like a big croissant, just like the croissants waiting for us at the market. On the right, you'll see these two little electricity distribution transformation centers here on the right, reminding us of the huge quantities of electricity that Quebec produces every year. We produce enough electricity to generate profits of up to $4 billion. Now, I'm talking about hydroelectricity produced through these huge hydroelectric dams. Electricity was nationalized in the 1960s. So now these hydroelectric dams belong to the Quebec state-owned company, to the Crown Corporation called Hydro-Québec.
So do they export the electricity to US?
Do we export electricity in the US? Oh, do we? Absolutely we do. Yes, because our electricity, thank you for the question, is very cheap. And well, some people very close to us are in the market to buy electricity. So even New York City is partly lit with electricity from Quebec. A $10 billion deal was just struck with Massachusetts, and so on and so forth. On the left, this white piece of art made by a Catalan artist is made out of different symbols. And if you look at it from a certain angle, you'll recognize somebody sitting down with their knees bent, with their arms wrapped around their knees. Jaume Plensa is the name of the Catalan artist. Now crossing the Lachine Canal. So this canal was dug 200 years ago. In front of us on the left, we can see this big blue disc mural here on the left. An abstract mural on this brand new apartment building. On the right, you can see also crossing the canal this elevated train track. That is for the brand new electric train, but the electric train right now we cannot see. On the left, these are flour silos. And if you look carefully on the left, you'll see that there's even a street here on the left, a street that goes right through the silos. Here on the left, we have this little container terminal with those blue cranes. The ship left yesterday. You can see all those containers. That is not the port, that is just a little container terminal. On the left, those silos are malt silos. And now on the right, we'll see more of those electricity installations. This is a brand new one, actually. Here on the right, you can see the architecture is different, with well, less concrete is one thing. So here on the right, that is a brand new electricity transformation center that just opened. It is replacing the one further behind that is made out of concrete. So the hydroelectric dams, by the way, are far, far away from here. I mean, there's a few that are close, but most of them are far away. You need to drive 10, 15, 20 hours to go there. And they're huge. Picture structures that are 200 meters tall. That's how big those structures are. 99% of our electricity in Quebec is hydroelectricity. We have no nuclear power. Well, we have one nuclear power plant in Quebec, but it's dormant. In front of us is the river, the St. Lawrence River, and in front of us, maybe you can read a Victoria Jubilee Bridge on the right. That is the oldest bridge on the St. Lawrence River. Now, why are the signs bilingual? Port de of Montréal, centre-ville downtown, because we are in the port of Montreal, and ports in Canada, just like bridges, belong to the federal government. So that's why also here, Rue Carrie-Derrick Street. And being federal, well, they don't need to comply with the provincial Charte de la langue française. So that is the provincial law that says that signs have to be in French. So on the right, for example, you see those signs are in French. That is not for the port itself. It just says that the casino is to the right. But those little signs that say that the street is closed, those are bilingual because this is the street and we are in the port of Montreal. Bridges are the same, they will have bilingual signs, but anywhere else in Quebec, signs have to be in French so as to protect French. Sometimes a second language can also be used, but it has to be less prominent than French. We're now making a right on a dam, but that is not a hydroelectric dam. This is a dam, El Moyer. This is a dam made to stop the current from causing floodings. On the left, by the way, look at the bus in the other lane. Look at the name, 777. That is our casino shuttle, 777. Get it? Wait, it gets better. What's the name of our airport shuttle? 747. I mean, don't come and tell us we're not funny at Montreal. In front of us on the left again, the containers. Now, containers revolutionized the world of shipping, being perfectly intermodal, meaning the same container you can move by truck, by train, by ship, and by plane. What did we use before containers? Silos. On the left, you can see a pretty long abandoned warehouse that still has 200 silos. It is all rusty because it's been abandoned 30 years ago. It used to be full of wheat and cereal that came from western provinces such as Alberta. But it's really in the 50s that containers came to be. So we are on this artificial piece of land, which is 1.5 kilometers long. It is a very narrow artificial piece of land built in the late 1800s to stop the current from causing floodings. We'll see the current later on. It is quite a strong current, and the floodings were awful, especially at this time of the year in spring. Now on the right, we'll see a masterpiece of modern architecture. It is the iconic Habitat 67, Habitat 67. Look at those 350 concrete blocks. Each block is pretty small, as you can see, and yet each block will cost you $600,000, and you will need 2, if not 3, for your apartment. Why would you pay so much? It is one of the few buildings from the very successful 1967 World's Fair. It is unique in terms of architecture. And of course, on your left is the breathtaking view you can enjoy from the comfort of your block. Look at that skyline here on the left. I will show you where the surfers go, but you can see these people are surfers here on the right in the grass. Look at that, a very hip surfer with the toque, with the wool cap, and it's just not to look cool, although they do look cool. It's actually to surf. So here on the left the skyline, but Angelo is the best, and he will make the extra special lookout stop, which is not in the brochure, but we'll do it because it's a nice view. On the right, if you twist your neck a little bit, you'll see those white waters. Those are permanent waves. It is there that people surf. And do we have people surfing right now? Not yet, but that guy that we just saw will be surfing right there on the right. So these are permanent waves. They're always there. You don't need to wait for the wave. The wave is waiting for you. So you gotta find a better excuse than, oh well, there was no wave. No, the wave is always there. On the right, the oldest bridge spanning across the St. Lawrence River. We saw a section of that bridge earlier. This is from the 1850s, and what did we do before we built that bridge in the 1850s? Ice bridges. Imagine how thick ice had to be for trains to run on it. But those were the good old days before the global warming. On the left, the green bridge that we'll take later to come back to the island of Montreal. On the right, the old Place des Nations. Here on the right, the old Place des Nations. This is where all official ceremonies took place during the crazy 1967 World's Fair. Why crazy? Because we had 52 million visitors in only 6 months. We are now going to see this little island called Ile Sainte-Hélène. In front of us on the other island on the left, you'll see this white building with the vertical stripes. This is the casino of Montreal, where the shuttle takes you. That used to be the Pavilion of France during the crazy summer of '67. On your left again, Place des Nations. And now we will see the current, because it's one thing to hear, to know about the current, but you want to see it. Now get ready for that crazy current on your right through the fence. Look at the water where it hits the pillars of the bridge. Look at that water on the right. Again, here on the right, through the fence. Here on the right. Now, some people will say, blah, 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 it's so strong, you cannot swim. That's not true. You can swim, but only once. On the right, the other island is an entirely artificial island. It was built for the 1967 World's Fair, using partially the dirt from the 20 metro stations that were built during the early 1960s. It used to be covered with pavilions, but most pavilions were demolished to be replaced with the Formula One race track. On the left, that red building, that is the old Korean pavilion. Here on the left, it has seen better days, but you can still imagine that it looks like a Korean temple. Here on the left, it is one of the very few pavilions that we still have from the World's Fair. So on the right, you can see some of the seats of the Formula One race track. That is where the Grand Prix du Canada takes place in June every year. In front of us on the left, another iconic building, the old U.S. Pavilion for the World's Fair. It is one of those so-called buckyballs made by Buckminster Fuller. Here on the left, the Montreal flag is floating in it because it is now an environmental museum that belongs to the city of Montreal. So this is 60 meters tall, and it was built as the U.S. Pavilion for the '67 World's Fair. An iconic building. We'll see it again later. Oh, and Angelo's making this special. So you can look at the grass, since those holes are groundhog holes. We can also look, so here on the left, those holes are groundhog holes. But look at the biosphere, 60 meters tall. It used to be covered with acrylic, but acrylic burns very easily. The whole sheet of acrylic burned after the World's Fair. Nobody died. And now you have the raw structure. It is called the geodesic dome. It is the actual name. And now let's keep our eyes open. We should be able to see groundhogs, marmotitas. Let's see. There's also foxes, zorritos, but they're pretty hard to spot, the little foxes. On the right is an old restaurant because asbestos was found in the building when we tried to renovate it 15 years ago, and asbestos is a party killer when you want to do renovations. So this island is called the Île Sainte-Hélène. It was used for the World's Fair. There were a lot of pavilions. Angelo, where are the groundhogs? Yesterday we saw so many, or 2 days ago we saw so many. So Angelo, being the best, will make the extra photo stop, which is at this lookout. We got people from New Jersey. Well, New Jersey have a distance that allows you to look at the Manhattan skyline. Well, it's the same thing here. When you are on this little island, you have a little distance that allows you to look at the Montreal skyline. Not as big as Manhattan, but different. We have a mountain, Manhattan doesn't. We have a cross on the mountain. So you will see that very soon when we make the photo stop. Just before we get to the lookout, we will see a map on your right. Angela will drive a little slowly for you to be able to see the map. On the map you will see the two islands that were used for the World's Fair. So the upper and the lower island. We are on the upper island. The lower island with the blue stripe, that is where the Formula One racetrack is. Here on the right. Merci Angelo. The mechanical rooms for the elevator.
There's so many sitting areas there.
Again, we will see the biosphere. So like I said, anybody have a question? Like I said, the biosphere was built as this US pavilion by this famous engineer Buckminster Fuller. You might know of Epcot in Florida. Well, Epcot was based off of that. Epcot is the 80s, that is the 60s. And the acrylic sheet burnt down. It only took 15 minutes. So now all you have is the raw structure, the raw metal structure of this geodesic dome. It was made as a prototype, so to speak, because in the 50s and the 60s, Mr. Buckminster Fuller was studying the environment already. He was definitely ahead of his time, and he envisioned that in the future, which is now, people could live, for example, in spheres like that with water and plants. So it's retro-futuristic in that sense. So now we'll go back to the island of Montreal. We'll take that green bridge, Pont Jacques-Cartier. If you look at the pillars of the bridge on the right, you will see that they are pointy. Why are they pointy? To break the ice. I mean, there is no ice anymore, but there used to be ice. Now, due to global warming, the river no longer freezes over. Just behind the amusement park, just behind the bridge, we will see the amusement park. It's called La Ronde. It's a Six Flags amusement park, and it will open in June. It's not open yet. It's open from June to October, so for almost 6 months. So here on the right, you can see that big brown roller coaster that is called Le Monstre, the monster, because it's built out of wood so that it shakes, so that you feel you're going to fall into the river. We are now on the Pont Jacques Cartier. Jacques Cartier was this French explorer who came here in the 1500s, and he saw the native village at the foot of the mountain that prompted French to come back 100 years later to found this city. Here on the right, the amusement park. It was first opened in the 60s. Behind the amusement park, you'll see the beginning of the port of Montreal, where those cranes are. That is just the beginning, because the port is actually 25 kilometers long. It's a pretty big port. On your left, you can see the skyline of Montreal. You can see that red brick building just here on the left with the name Molson on it. Molson is this brewery. It was founded right there here on the left in the 1700s, making it the oldest brewery in the world, outside of Europe, of course. It goes back to the 1700s. Now, if you look at these skyscrapers, the tallest skyscrapers are just as high as the mountain. You can see the cross on the mountain. That is where we'll make the last photo stop in the second half of the tour, on the Mont Royal. So just like in the port, on the bridges, signs are bilingual. And one of those bilingual signs, the white one coming up, will tell us that you cannot make a right on a red light on the island of Montreal. Here, that white sign tells us no right on red. The island of Montreal, just like New York City, is one of the few places in North America where you can never make a right on red. And because you can never make a right on red, well, you will never see a sign that says that you can not make a right on red, because you can never make a right on red. Now we'll see a concrete building coming up here on the left. That is the head office of the biggest union of Quebec, Confédération des Syndicats Nationaux. So Quebec is more unionized than the rest of Canada, and Canada is more unionized than the US. In front of us is the bridge where we just were, called Pont Jacques Cartier. We're making a left on Rue Sainte-Catherine. That is the same street as the big shopping street in downtown Montreal. Now, a few words on our electoral system, which some people are from the UK or Australia on the bus, so you know that system, but for the other ones, this is how it works. So it is the British system, because we are still part of the Commonwealth, like about 50 other countries. There are no term limits, which means that sometimes people grow tired of the head of state, which is what happened to Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau was in power for almost 10 years. Mind you, his dad was in power for almost 16 years, 50 years ago. So Justin Trudeau resigned a few months ago as the Prime Minister, as well as he resigned as the leader of the Liberal Party. When he resigned, there was an election inside the Liberal Party to elect his successor, and it quickly became Mr. Carney, Mark Carney. So Mark Carney became the new leader of the Liberal Party and also became the acting Prime Minister of Canada. By the way, Canada has a population of 40 million people, which is the same as California, just to give you an idea. And you have 1/4 of the population of Canada, roughly, that's in Quebec. And then you have more than 1/3 that is in Ontario. 15 million people living in Ontario. So the more than one half of the population of Canada live in Quebec and in Ontario. So Mr. Carney could have waited for the next elections, which were supposed to be in October of this year. But he wanted to have a clear approval of the people, so he called for elections, because that's something you can do in the British system. But because we are in the Commonwealth, you need the approval of King Charles. That is done through the Governor General. So Mr. Carney met with the Governor General, and he asked for the authorization to launch elections. And the Governor General, she said yes, no problem. Usually they say yes. So he launched the campaign that happened 3 weeks ago. We started the campaign, and it will be for another 2 weeks, well, plus 1 day. The elections will be on Monday, April the 28th. The way it works is that we have ridings, which are electoral districts. In Canada, you have almost 350. So in each of those 350 ridings, you have an election. That's why we say elections, because it's really elections. So you have an election with different candidates from different parties, and they all compete in order to become the member of parliament called MP, who will represent that riding. And by the way, how much does an MP make per year? Starts with 2, but it's not too much, or maybe it is too much, but that's not the answer. The answer is $203,100 per year. So more than 200,000, and of course if you're a minister you make more. So speaking of ministers, in the British system, unlike the US or the French system, you need to be elected as an MP if you want to be a minister. So the head of state cannot nominate anybody as a minister. A minister is the equivalent of a secretary in the US political system. And that includes the Prime Minister. So the Prime Minister also needs to first be elected as an MP. Well, who becomes the Prime Minister? The leader of the party who wins the elections. And what party wins the elections? The party that wins the highest number of ridings. The party that elects the highest number of members of parliament. Automatically, the leader of the party becomes the Prime Minister. Now, what are the different parties? Canada first started in the 1860s. 1867, the Confederation started, and since then it's been pretty much the Liberals and the Conservatives that have been exchanging power. I'm talking Canada. In the provinces, they have the same system. In the provinces, other parties have been in power, but in Canada it's been essentially the Liberals and the Conservatives. The Liberals are slightly on the left, the Conservatives are slightly on the right. There is a third nationwide party that is NDP, New Democratic Party, and they are further left. In Quebec, but only in Quebec, there is a fourth big party which is called the Bloc Québécois, and they are only in Quebec because it is a separatist party, even though it is a federal party. So that party has members of parliament who represent ridings from Quebec, who sit at the House of Commons, which is the Canadian Parliament in Ottawa, and they promote the separation of Quebec from the rest of Canada. Well, they do much more, but that's their objective. In other words, their goal is to not to have to exist anymore. Because Quebec has 1/4 of the population, they also have 1/4 of the ridings, roughly. And out of the 78 MPs in Quebec right now, before the elections, right now the situation is as follows. 33 Liberal MPs, also exactly 33 Bloc Québécois MPs. And then you have 9 Conservatives, who are all in rural regions close to the US after Quebec City. And then you have one NDP and two independent who left their party. But things are about to change because the situation in the US is harming the separatist cause. One direct effect of the political situation in the US was to strengthen the Canadian unity. Now, about the parties, you can associate a color with each party. For example, here on the right, red means liberal. Here in this district, since it's a working class district, you have only signs from the left-wing parties. On the left, the orange is NDP, and now we'll see a light blue, which is Bloc Québécois. Because Bloc Québécois is a left-wing party, and this needs to be said because if you think about Europe, nationalism means right-wing or far right, but here it's left-wing. And you've noticed that here in this electoral district, the three main candidates are three women. So here again on the right is the orange candidate. Orange means NDP, so NDP is pretty far, I mean it's not far left, but it's further left than the Liberals. But like I said, the Bloc Québécois, the separatist party, is also left, meaning in favor of clean energy. And then you have also the conservatives that are also blue. They're dark blue, and we'll see a dark blue conservative electoral sign. The fifth party that you can see signs of is the Green Party. By the way, on the right, this is an old public bath. Very elegant 100-year-old architecture here on the right. Here on the left is conservative, dark blue. And on the right is a logo by Bloc Québécois. Je choisis l'énergie propre. I choose clean energy. In front of us is the old market with that beautiful fountain. What do you call a fountain in April in Quebec? A sculpture. So this is the market. Now I have to be honest with you. I got bad news. There's not a lot of restrooms, and that's why other guides don't come here. They go elsewhere, where you have London or Barcelona. Montreal is one of the few cities in the world that hosted both a World's Fair and Summer Olympics. So we'll now talk about the Olympics. But just give me 1 second, because on your right I would like to show you some of the famous Montreal spiraling staircases. Look at those here on the right. So typical of Montreal, built in the late early 1900s. In front of us, the red brick building, now it's apartments. It was built as a cookie factory. So going back to the Olympics and to the World's Fair, we saw a few remaining buildings, was a huge success in 1967, as 52 million visitors came in only 6 months. If you switch those two numbers, you'll get 76, and 76 is the year of the Olympics. And well, could have been a little better, but we'll see. On the left, those were built as veterans' houses. You see those houses that are different than the rest of the buildings you see. So these are more normal, more standard apartment buildings here. And then again, we have these old veterans' houses built in the 40s and 50s for the World War II veterans. So we'll go see the Olympic Stadium that has the tallest leaning tower in the world. But before we get there, I would like to show you the sculpture of a very famous hockey player who was extremely beloved and popular in the 1940s and 50s. I'm talking about Maurice Richard. You will see a sculpture of him on the left in front of the round arena named after him. He had fire in his eyes, that's what goalkeepers said. So on your left, ladies and gents, with snow around him and fire in his eyes, Maurice Rocket Richard. So, just to show you how popular Maurice Richard was and still is, in 1960 he retired. In 1996, that's 36 years later, we made an official closing ceremony at the Forum where he had played all of his career, where the local team, Le Canadien, had played for more than 70 years. So we made an official closing ceremony we called Old Players. He was the last of the old timers to be called on ice. At that time, he's 74 years old. He comes on ice on the red carpet, and spontaneously, 36 years after his retirement, people start applauding him. They stand up and they applaud him for almost 8 minutes without interruption. 36 years after his retirement. It's a very moving video. I mean, he knows that Quebec is watching him, so he refrained from actually crying. But you can see that he had wet eyes. I mean, when I watched the video, it was only my cat looking at me, so I didn't care, and I bawled like a little baby because it was so moving. In front of us is one of the 2 pyramids of the Olympic Village, built for the 6,000 athletes of the 1976 Olympics. Big question is, out of 6,000 athletes, what was the percentage of women? What do you think? So, in Athens, in 1896, 0% women. In Paris, 2024, 50% women. In Montreal, 1976, what was the percentage? Care to guess? 20%. Well, 20.68% to be precise. And we could say that thanks to Caitlyn Jenner, that number did go up to 20.70% 8 years ago. On your left, you will see the tallest leaning tower in the whole world. That is the Olympic Tower. That is, it was supposed to be ready for the 1976 Olympics. It was inaugurated 11 years later. It doesn't matter, it happens to the best of us. We have people from Australia on the bus. The inspiration for this Olympic Stadium, and look at it, it's beautifully hit by the sunlight. It looks like a giant flying saucer. The inspiration was the Australian Pavilion at the 1970 Osaka World's Fair. The World's Fair in Osaka just started yesterday. Well, there was another one 55 years ago, and the Australian Pavilion was the direct inspiration for the French architect who made this piece. What are the cranes doing? They're about to make the 3rd roof. Now the first roof, because that's the whole point of the inclined tower, was supposed to hold the roof and to open it and close it very casually. The first roof was not ready for the Olympics. When it was ready, it was a retractable roof that actually was not retractable. Then we replaced it with a second roof that was supposed to be retractable, but that also was not retractable. So we are now replacing it with a third roof that will not be retractable. However, it will retract $870 million from our budget. So that's what those cranes are doing. Now you'll see a bunch of flags. You will see flags of countries that don't exist anymore, like Czechoslovakia, for example. But also you will not see most African flags because 20 African countries boycotted the games in order to protest against the apartheid, not because South Africa was here, but because New Zealand was here, and New Zealand had just done a rugby tournament in South Africa. As for that flag here on the left, well, there's red and white flags. That is the logo of the Olympics, and that is a combination of the 5 Olympic rings with the logo of Montreal. And that makes the logo of the Olympics. And who was the mascot of the Olympics? Which animal? A beaver. Et comment s'appelait la mascotte, Angelo? Habitude. Comment ça s'appelait la mascotte? Amic. Amic. Amic was the name of the mascot.
Louis, Louis.
Yes, question.
What are you using it for now?
Very good question. What are we using the stadium for? So, the general opinion is that it's pretty useless, despite the fact that people do have a love and hate relationship, emphasis on the hate with the stadium. I'll answer more, but I just wanted to show you on the left this double mansion built in the 1910s, perfectly symmetrical, Beaux-Arts style. It was built for these two rich brothers, Oscar and Marius Dufresne, and now it's a history museum. The brothers Dufresne were among the only ones who were French speakers, French Canadians as we called ourselves back then, who made it, who made money. So going back to the stadium, well, we used to have a baseball team called Les Expos, simply because the team was founded after the World's Fair, and Expo is French for World's Fair. But the thing with Les Expos is that they decided to play a dirty trick on us, and that they changed their name to Washington Nationals, and they moved to DC 20 years ago. So we took it personal. Anyway, we no longer have a resident team. Which does not mean that there is not a soccer game or a football game or even a baseball game that's played once in a while. I got a few games in 2015. That was the Women's Soccer World Cup. By the way, what's the difference between women's soccer and men's soccer? It's pretty similar. See, in women's soccer, the soccer players play soccer. In men's soccer, the soccer players they seem more sensitive. Anyway, they fall on the floor and they cry. That's what somebody else just said. It's a woman. So you have to understand, ladies, that us men, we are very sensitive. Yes, well, and I also have another proof of that. So the Women's World Cup was held in different cities in Canada in 2015, and games were held here in Montreal. At that time, we still had the roof, and that means that we had artificial grass. But women are tough, so they can deal with that. See, next year will be the men's World Cup of soccer, and Montreal had been pre-selected. But the FIFA said, okay, you're pre-selected, but you need to have real grass. In other words, you need to get rid of your roof. Why? Well, because men, like I said, we are more sensitive, and so we cannot play on artificial grass because it's too hard for us, and so we might get hurt. So we need the softness of real grass. Double standards, as you say. And at that time, for the government of Quebec, well, it was not a priority, so they said, okay, fine, no. And so there will be no game at the 2026 Soccer World Cup held in Montreal. But what sometimes people don't think of is that a stadium like that can be used and is used for other events that have nothing to do with sports. For example, commercial shows. For example, the car show. And it's actually a great place for a car show because it's huge. You go there and you can see a lot of cars at the same time. And even though the car show will last a whole week, people sometimes they think, oh, well, it's only used for a week. But imagine organizing a car show. You need actually 2 weeks to organize it. Then it lasts 1 week, and then you need another almost 2 weeks to, get rid of all the cars and everything. And so even though it lasts for the public only 1 week, the whole event will last more than a month. And so despite the general opinion, it's actually used, well, for at least half the year. Not now because now it's in renovation, but it's used for different events. It's also used for concerts. Despite the catastrophic acoustics. Now, the first concert was held in 1977 At that time, one of the most popular British bands was Pink Floyd. And they came here, they filled the stadium, 78,000 people came. And they realized that the acoustics are disastrous. It was the Animals tour. Does that mean that no other band came here? Oh no, all the way up to Metallica. 2 years ago, Metallica did a double bill and they almost sold out. Maybe that's because for Metallica, the actual quality of sound is not what counts the most. You cannot say that about this US artist who, by the way, did not win any Grammys. I'm talking about Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift, she has true standards when it comes to acoustics, and so this is just not good enough for her. Which is why me, as a very smart man, I decided to outsmart my wife, and I said a few months ago, honey, I promise that we will go together to the Taylor Swift concert as soon as she comes to Montreal. But how shocking, she's the one who outsmarted me. So 2 weeks later, she goes, honey, I'm going to Toronto to see Taylor Swift. And I said, well, aren't the tickets $3,000, which they were? And she said, funny, you thought I asked for your opinion. So now you know why I'm working on a Sunday. No, so she went and she did find a good deal given the circumstances, because it was quote unquote only $1,100. But she will remember it for the rest of her life. She's very happy, and so that makes me very happy. That's all. Angelo taught me all that. He taught me the nodding of the head, and it works wonders. You're right. Yes, dear. Yes. Taylor Swift, absolutely no problem. Yes. Yeah, because by the way, she made 6 concerts in Toronto. That means more than 300,000 tickets, and it was impossible to get one. So what else is happening at the stadium? The last time that a Pope came to Montreal, that was 40 years ago, the mid-80s, it was John Paul II. He celebrated a big mass in front of 50,000 people, and after the mass, a 16-year-old girl came on stage and she sang a song about a dove. Who was that 16-year-old girl? You all know her. The most famous Quebec singer ever. Céline Dion, absolutely. Thank you. Yes. And the rest definitely is history. So that gig at the stadium had been organized by her then manager, René Angélil, and he's the one who decided to double as her husband 10 years later in 1994, when they got married at Église Notre-Dame, which you saw during the little Old Montreal walking tour. And then he died because he was older than her, and the funeral also took place at the same Église Notre-Dame. We are now entering this district called Plateau Mont-Royal. We'll cross a street that's called Papineau, P-A-P-I-N-E-A-U, Papineau. Now Papineau was this lawyer, intellectual politician in the early 1800s, and he was so smart that we have this expression in Quebec, ça prend pas la tête à Papineau pour comprendre. That means you don't need to have Papineau's head. So when something is obvious. Example, you don't need to have Papineau's head to know that when it's minus 20, you need to cover your ears if you go out. So that's how smart the guy was. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to help you out. School built in the 1800s. Look at the size of it. It was repurposed 40 years ago in the 1980s, and they made apartments. You can see the golden letters. It's called it was called the Mont Saint-Louis. And here on the left, again, an example of the 1800s French Catholic architecture. This here on the left was a monastery. The name is still above the door just here. It says Bon Pasteur. Pasteur means shepherd, and who is the good shepherd in the Catholic religion? Saint Jean Baptiste, Saint John the Baptist. And you can see Saint John the Baptist in the next building on the facade up there. There's a little alcove, and there he is. And Saint Jean Baptiste, Saint John the Baptist, happens to be the patron saint of Quebec. So Fête Nationale, National Day of Quebec, is celebrated on Saint John the Baptist Day on June 24th. So here on your left, if you look up, you'll see Saint John the Baptist, the Good Shepherd. But the building had a fire 2 years ago. Now we're crossing Boulevard Saint-Laurent, so you remember how I said that the island of Montreal is shaped like a big croissant. Well, picture a knife that cuts right through the croissant. That's the street that we're crossing right now. So the St. Lawrence River is on your left, a few kilometers that way. Coming up on your right, we will see the little head statue of Camille Lorrain just here behind the police officer. That's the man who made the language law in the 1970s aimed at protecting the French. And now we'll see on the left buildings of Université du Québec à Montréal. So this is an older, those are modern buildings, which is one of our 4 big universities in Montreal. Big university city, Montreal, 200,000 university students. And now you'll see on the right 5 Montreal symbols. Pay attention. You will see first a squirrel riding a bagel bicycle, then the Mount Royal with the cross, the Biosphere, a saxophone for the jazz festival, and a smoked meat sandwich. So on your right, first, squirrel riding a bagel bicycle, followed by the Mount Royal with the cross, the Biosphere, this lovely girl playing saxophone, and the smoked meat sandwich with the popping pickles. So different Montreal symbols. Here on the right, you can see gargoyles here on the right. Coming up on your left, you can see this little blue pyramid. That is where the head office of L'Auto-Québec is. L'Auto-Québec is the Quebec state-owned company that manages all gambling operations. Now we will see on the right the music faculty of McGill. So McGill is the oldest of our universities. It is 200 years old. So here on the right is the modern building that's part of the music faculty, and right after we'll see an older building that's behind scaffoldings because it is the old Royal Victoria College, which was first built in the 1800s as the first university for women. So here on the right, you can see the old building that was the first university for women. And because it was named after Victoria, well, there she is, except she's shy, so she's hiding for the time of the renovations on the right in that box. On the right above the door, you can even see Royal Victoria College. And now we'll see more buildings of McGill. So like I said, 200,000 university students in Montreal. Big university city. Oldest one, McGill, at 200 years old. Biggest one, Université de Montréal. Almost 70,000 students.
Are we going to the University of Montreal?
Any question?
Are we going to the University of Montreal right now? Is it there?
We will see a little section of Université de Montréal, yes.
Oh.
Here on the right is the main campus to McGill, the main campus of McGill. And there are tensions between the students and the university. There has been a lot of demonstrations against the invasion of Gaza, and now the university has officially interrupted its relation with the Association of Students. Here on the right, that's one of the libraries of McGill. And on the right, that is the Business School, Faculty of Management of McGill. University is a lot cheaper here than in the US, and McGill being an English language university and being a good one, well, it does attract a lot of people from the US. Now we'll see a few mentions, old mentions, reminding us of the golden age of Montreal, because Montreal used to be the biggest and the richest city of all of Canada. Now it has been Toronto since the 1970s, but it used to be Montreal. Why? Thanks to its harbor. We saw the old port at the beginning of the tour, and we mentioned how the port was very big. Well, because of that, the city grew to be the big metropolis. And when it was the big metropolis, this district specifically, late 18, early 1900s, was by far the richest district. Look at the mansion on the left with the details that are carved into the stone. On the right, it's a private club. And look at those two mansions here on the right. Again, I mean old mansions. There's even a sculpture with me and Angelo here on the right. And here on the left, you can see the Ritz-Carlton with that protruding roof that is a marquee. It is here that Richard Burton and Liz Taylor got married in 1964 in that hotel, before getting divorced in 1974, of course, before getting remarried in 1975, and before getting redivorced in 1976. On the right, if you look up, it looks like a castle. That's what it's called, Le Château. It's a luxury apartment building. In front of us on the right, basking in sunlight, is an old Roman Revival church with a pretty unusual piece of art made by a local Montreal artist, David Altmed. So this old Roman Revival or Richardsonian style church with those typical half-circle arches, that is now a concert hall. And now on your left, on a big mural, Leonard Cohen down the street on the left. Look at that on the left, Leonard Cohen. And on the right is the beautiful church, beautifully lit by the sunlight here on the right. No longer a church, now it's a concert hall, part of the museum. And here on the right, look at that, those are white Vermont marble columns here. That is the Fine Arts Museum. It's one of our 5 pavilions. Here on the right, luxury apartment buildings. This one here is from the 1960s. followed by this one here from the years 2010. And there's another one here coming up on the right. This was built in the early 1900s, this luxury apartment building. On the right, an old luxury apartment building, and here on the right, this is red Scottish sandstone. Those are old mansions from the 1800s, and now it's called adrenaline, and people come to get tattooed and pierced. Things change. Here on your right, this is where your tour guide lives, in one of those balconies up there. This is where I live this is where we live a very happy life, the four of us, my wife, the cat, Taylor Swift, and myself. That of course means that I'm the fourth most important person in the apartment. I'm not far behind Taylor Swift though, right after Taylor Swift. Oh, how did I meet my wife, you ask? Funny you should ask. True story. 8 years ago, I'm supposed to go to New York to see my girlfriend, and on 2 days' notice, she texts me that, quote-unquote, her uncle is sick. Anyway, so instead I decided to go to Boston. I will never know if the uncle was indeed sick, anyway, but it turned out to be, the beginning of a new chapter in my life, because I decided to go to Boston instead. I went to Fenway Park because I'm not a baseball fan, but I'm a history fan. And right next to me was this woman who started talking to me. And right away I said, listen lady, please refrain from talking to me. My eyes are glued on the Red Sox players. But anyway, she kept talking, and long story short, we got married 2 years ago. There you go. So you never know what baseball has in store for you. So you bet that whenever I hear Sweet Caroline, it hits a soft spot in my heart. So this street is called the Chemin de la Côte des Neiges, which means snow slope. Here on the right is the latest addition to the Mount Royal Park. And now on the left we'll see an interesting urban feature. It's this little island where you have two apartment buildings. That's the first one here on the left from the 30s. There's another one behind. In between the two 1930s apartment buildings are these two houses that are older than the apartment buildings. Look at that here on the left through the gate. You can see those two houses, red brick and yellow brick, which are kind of tucked between the apartment buildings, and that's the second one here on the left. Here on the left, Anna Gainey, the daughter of Bob Gainey. She's the spitting image of her dad. I don't know if you knew Angela, but yeah, I looked it up, and yeah, she is Bob Gainey's daughter. Here on the left, look at the so-called gingerbread, the detailed wooden sculptures there. the right, this is a funeral home. I would like to now tell you a very sad story that happened 36 years ago in 1989. A young man wanted to become an engineer, so he applied at renowned engineering school Polytechnique, which is affiliated with Université de Montréal. His application was denied. He said that feminists were responsible for his failure. He reacted very violently. He killed 14 women in a classroom, 13 students and 1 staff member. It is by far the worst shooting to happen in Quebec and the second worst to happen in all of Canada. I'm telling you this awful story because we will soon see the memorial park that was made to honor the memory of these 14 women. What you will see is 14 little metal cubes, each metal cube representing the first letter of the first name of these 14 victims. The name of the park is the date that it happened, 6 December 89, so December 6th, 1989. Every year for the anniversary there is a ceremony that takes place at the Memorial Park where we put a white rose on each of the 14 metal cubes. There's also another ceremony at 5:10 p.m. that takes place on one of the lookouts on the mountain, and that ceremony takes place at 5:10 p.m. because that's when the first shots were fired. And for that second ceremony, we say the names of the 14 victims, and after each name we light the sky of Montreal with a big beam of light. So on your left you can see the little memorial park perpendicular to us with these 2 rows of each 7 metal cubes. You can also see the sign, the gray sign with the name of the park, which is the name of the date. And in front of us on the right is the Université de Montréal campus. It's in one of those many buildings that tragedy happened in 1989. Again, on the left, parallel to us, you can see this little park with the 2 rows of the 7 metal cubes. Now, on a more positive note, on your left, you can see high up on the mountain, Oratoire Saint-Joseph, which is the biggest church in all of Canada. Now, the height inside of that church, when you are below the dome, is 60 meters. You remember the biosphere that we saw on that little island? Well, the biosphere is also 60 meters. That means that height-wise, you could fit the biosphere inside the church. This is a pretty modern church. It was finished in the 1950s. It is made out of Quebec granite. The style is Italian Renaissance Revival. The dome is copper. Yes, so because it's Palm Sunday, you can see this girl carrying a palm. So she came back from Oratoire Saint-Joseph. It's a big pilgrimage site. You can easily spend 2 hours there. It's huge. You have elevators, escalators, stairs that you can climb on your knees, different exhibits, different chapels. And some of those chapels have hundreds of crutches that were given by people who were healed by Frère André. Frère means brother, and Frère André was a doorman at a school nearby in the late 1800s, and he healed a lot of people. Again, on the right, you can see through the branches, Oratoire Saint-Joseph. And that, ladies and gents, is the only building in Montreal that is allowed to be taller than the mountain. I mean, the fact that it's on the mountain does help, granted, but still it's the only building that's allowed to be higher than the summit of the mountain. Now I keep saying the mountain, and it's very important. It's very important to always say the mountain as much as possible, especially since it's actually not the proper term. But we live in a collective denial, so don't you dare call it an H-I-double-L. This does not fly with us. By the way, on the left, you can see the very clever trick that was found by whoever came up with the logo of the Liberal Party, because you had to have a logo that works both in French and in English. It's the same word, except in French you have an accent. So what they did is, instead of putting an accent, which would have looked weird in English, they added a little maple leaf on top of the E. The stem of the maple leaf also acts as the accent aigu, as the accent on top of the E. So a very clever way to go around this little hurdle. So it looks just as perfect in French and in English. 1,000 tombstones. So 1 million burials, that means that a lot of Montrealers, including your driver and your tour guide, have close family members who are buried there. It is still active, by the way, even though it was opened in the 1850s. After that, we'll see the Protestant cemetery, which is a little smaller, but it's still big. Then there's two more Jewish cemeteries. We have a big Jewish population in Montreal, 90,000 people. But those Jewish cemeteries you cannot see from the bus. On the right, the reason why people came here to park is that we have behind the parking lot, we have a little artificial lake called Lac au Castor. That means Beaver Lake, but it does not mean that we have beavers. You can see on the right the water of the little Beaver Lake. In front of us, on the left, is this building with the green roof, I'm sorry, and that is where the Montreal Police stables are. Not the Canadian Mounted Police, the Montreal Municipal Police stables. And yes, we have horses. Oh, look at those Clydesdales in the middle. Beautiful animals with the white legs and the white snout. Look at those. And they're not small, and they're still used by police officers. And there's another kind here, a little smaller. That's the Canadian here on the left, with no white. Beautiful animals. There's just something about the proportions on a horse that just matches our aesthetics as humans. They're such beautiful animals. And now we'll see on the left the Protestant cemetery. It was designed in the true English garden style. What does that mean? It means, well, it means the opposite of a French garden, because in a French garden, everything is right angles. In the English garden, you want to have curves and hills to create the so-called vistas. There is a vista here on your left. Vista means a view with different levels of depth. So here on the left, you can see that vista with the hills and the curves. Look at that. Beautiful urban landscaping. And now we'll see on the left the western districts of Montreal. you can see the western districts of Montreal. I mean, Montrealers will call that the north, but that's another story. We have a, just like we're in Den Island, we call this the mountain. Well, we all call the north the east, and the west the north. You know, as long as everybody plays along, it works. But when you look at a map, you just wonder why. So ladies and gents, on the right is one half of the giant island, one half of the big croissant-shaped island where more than 1 million people live. And what can you see? The tallest leaning tower in the world, the Olympic Tower. So little photo stop, a last photo stop before we go back to the starting point. We're not in a rush, it's 12, so you can take your time, I mean, a few minutes. Be careful if you go out because the ground is not level.